Hi everyone and welcome back to SwitchUp and to our review of Mortal Shell on the Nintendo Switch. It was developed by Cold Symmetry and could be described as a dark atmospheric action RPG or Souls-like. It takes heavy inspiration from classics such as Dark Souls, but it has a surprising number of unique mechanics, as well as a bit of a surprising treat in store. Will this one make you praise the sun, or is it a hollow shell and merely an imitation of greatness? Let's find out. The narrative of Mortal Shell is shrouded in mystery, and it deals with different themes including loss, identity and redemption. As with any good Souls-like though, this is delivered in, let's say, a subtle way, whereby characters will spiel lines of dialogue
That beast down here, he served as a slave.
that make little to no sense, but something about their delivery just entices you. You want to know more about this place, and in turn this bleak and dangerous world. Environments will be filled with discoverable items which will give you further lore. You'll vaguely understand that you are an ethereal being who can inhabit these shells, and that by doing so you'll gain the power to vanquish the darkness. But the who, what, where, why, and how can be a little opaque at times, which is completely expected. The gameplay in Mortal Shell is challenging and it's unforgiving. You'll control your character with the left stick with both light and heavy attacks and the ability to parry. Now what sets this apart from some of its contemporaries is the titular shell. This allows you to inhabit the mortal form of fallen warriors, thus gaining their abilities. So, unlike others where you put points into specific statistics, here as you unlock them you'll simply choose the shell which best suits your playstyle. Combined with that are several unlockable weapons, again each with their own movesets. But regardless of who you choose and which weapon, the core gameplay remains the same. And vanquishing your foes is going to gain you a number of items which will progress your journey. First and foremost is the currency known as tar. This allows you to put points into upgrading different aspects of your character, but you'll also need glints. Now glints are obtained through defeating either more powerful normal enemies or in much greater quantities through defeating bosses, all the while chomping on mushrooms to restore your health. These will respawn after a set amount of time, so you can always collect them if you manage to survive, or indeed if you perish and you wait long enough. The shell system has one other cool mechanic up its sleeve though. If you take too much damage and your health reaches zero, the first time you'll be ripped from that mortal shell and sent flying across the screen. If you can get back to it in time, you'll find yourself with a brand new health bar maxed out and a second chance at glory. It's a very cool system, and as with any good Souls game, you can use this mechanic to cheese certain aspects of the game. Maybe you'd rather not run through all those enemies because you've died so many times, and instead you place your jump / untimely demise, death fall, in just the right spot, and yes, you die, but you get to come back again in the exact spot that you landed. In fact, Mortal Shells embraces that mindset. You'll be sending enemies falling off cliffs or baiting them into your traps, only to circle strafe your way to glory and then try and stagger them with a couple of massive hits. Under the bonnet, as you'd hope, there's a full stagger system, and the parries and ripostes, while requiring a little bit more timing and skill, offer you huge openings to do damage. Then finally we have the hardening mechanic. No, you don't need to turn the volume down and check that no one's listening. Hardening is the method through which you can turn yourself briefly to stone. If enemies attack just at the right time, this will deflect their attacks, with certain abilities even allowing you to restore your health or send that damage firing straight back at them. This mixed up combat quite a bit. If you found yourself without any stamina, you knew that you could rely on that hardening mechanic, albeit as long as the cooldown had finished. Combined with the parrying as well as the dodge dash, it keeps everything feeling entirely skill based. As far as difficulty goes, this game mode is quite difficult. You'll die several times and death will respawn all the enemies in an area, and depending on where your last checkpoint is, well, that's where you'll start from. It's also through those that you'll level up the individual aspects of your current mortal shell. As with all things, you could put points into several, but being a master of one tends to be the way to go. The stamina based combat is going to be very easy to pick up and play if you're familiar with the genre, and although seemingly open world, the story segment of the game is largely linear with a few winding paths, rather than something like Elden Ring and even Dark Souls to a degree. It's more akin to a large level from Demon Souls, which are interconnected interconnected. I did like the fact that you could switch shells at any point simply by choosing another one. And yes, when you fall, you will have to return to your body to regain any lost tar. Let's be honest now, us Souls fans can be a little bit snobbish when it comes to our beloved franchise, and this one for some veered a little too close to the sun, but I find it enjoyable. And then there's the little surprise that I spoke about in the introduction. Now, after it was initially released, the developers were working hard on an extra mode. It's known as the Virtuous Cycle, and you can access this from the main menu. What is it? Well, it's essentially a roguelike game built using the same mechanics as the story mode. You choose one of the 4 shells, with the 5th being unlocked, and any of the weapons. You'll then enter a random encounter, which uses many of the same maps, but they're out of order and interconnected in a different way, and you have to progress through defeating enemies and then unlocking new abilities and skills at these towers. In this situation, parries actually restore your health as you'll rip out the enemy's heart, and it's a surprisingly addictive and enjoyable mode. Every fight feels so much more important when you know that if you die, you are back to the start. And while that might not sound fun, it's actually easier to stay alive through parrying and gaining health at those pillars. Much like the single player, which has Fulgrim's Tower, in this mode you'll return to the Reverie. Any tar that you gained in your previous run you can then use to buy permanent upgrades. And both modes employ what's known as a familiarity mechanic, which I also thought was quite unique. Essentially what it means is every time you pick up an item in the game, you'll become more familiar with it. If it's a healing item like mushrooms, it means that they'll become more potent. Other ones, however, will require you to pick them up a certain amount of times before you can actually identify the effects that they're having. And lastly then, this Switch version, which is the complete edition of the game, does include the 5th character, Hadern, and one of the coolest weapons you'll ever see, the axe katana, which, yep, it's a axe and some katanas. When you combine the total package of what you're getting here in terms of gameplay and controls, there is a lot to love. It's let down a little bit by some performance issues, which we'll go into in the next section, but still, Souls fans, don't skip this one. The gameplay scores 17 out of 20, and the controls also score 17 out of 20. Unsurprisingly, by the look of it, Mortal Shell runs on the Unreal 4 engine. As far as the frame rate goes, well, it's targeting 30, in a strange way it seems to be 33, but particle effects cause serious slowdown, such as the clouds of poison gas, which are emitted by quite a few of the enemies. At all other times it's quite steady, at least in the main story mode of the game. However, when you enter the Virtuous Cycle, you will see a significant performance drop. It's still playable, but they'll certainly want to do some patchwork on that mode because it's so much fun. When playing in handheld, everything's better. The frame rate seems to maintain around about the same in story, which is to say 30 give or take. However, it's the visual quality that sees the biggest improvement. Now first, let's look at the full-blown large-scale TV version, and the dynamic resolution scaling is very heavy at times. There are certain areas where I wouldn't be surprised if it was lower than 540p when in docked mode. What's unusual is that they seem to have kept quite a few of the more taxing graphical options. Things like real-time screen space reflections, some of the shadowing, and some of the lighting effects. Now obviously the developer don't want to completely strip out everything that makes the game, but I think a little trimming could happen just to maintain that frame rate. In handheld, squeezing it down to the smaller screen, as we've said time and time again, it looks much better, and I would say this would be my preferred way to play. However, this happened. I can't say whether that's a one-off, but it's not a good look, and I won't play it for very long because obviously it could cause some issues if you have any type of epilepsy. I'm sure we'll have the debate about a Switch Pro in the comments again, but a little more optimization could certainly bring this up to par, and I've still been very much enjoying the Switch version. But every cloud, I haven't had any crashes. I give the visuals and performance combined 8 out of 20. The soundtrack for the most part is excellent. It includes what you'd expect in darker, more melancholic music, but there's also songs here from a Greek black metal band. The audio for the most part is also strong, and it's nice to see the option to change the fidelity of the soundscape, although why you'd want to reduce this below high is kind of lost on me. The weapon sounds as well as the grunts and screams of enemies as you slice them to pieces are all pleasing to the ear, and I give sound and audio 18 out of 20. Mortal Shell, the complete edition, will cost you £24.99 or your regional equivalent, with the download size of just over 5 gigs. The base story mode will take you around about 20 hours, but the inclusion of the expanded content in the form of that roguelite mode could add potentially 50 to 100 hours more gameplay. The overall value will take a hit because performance isn't quite where I'd like to see it, but in my opinion it's still a very enjoyable Souls game and doesn't quite deserve the criticism it's received for its similarities to you know what. I give the value 15 out of 20.
Untouched by false truths.
Mortal Shells is a more accessible Souls game for those who struggle with high difficulty. Although it still has its challenge, some of those shells offer a much more forgiving experience, and then the roguelite mode will cater almost to any type of player. Hopefully we see another patch soon. Currently it gets a SwitchUp score of 75%. Let me know in the comments, hopefully this was of some use to you. Are you a Souls fan as well? And it is nice to be doing the first review back after the new year. So yeah, thanks for watching. If you want to pick up any of these games, you can use code SwitchUp to save yourself 10% in the month of January over at switchup.gg, and we get a little bit of a kickback from Nintendo. Thanks to all of you and our Patreons as well, and as always, for all things Switch all the time, keep it Switch up. Cheers guys, see ya!